How you doing?
I'm good. I'm real good. How about you?
I'm decent, man. We had to have you on today because you're doing a whole bunch of stuff. We appreciate everything you're doing for the Central Illinois area. You continue to kill
Illinois,
it.
period.
Yeah, Illinois,
definitely
period.
killing it. Definitely killing it.
Not only in the legislature, but you know what I'm saying, people that look up to you and stuff like that. I'm gonna jump straight to it. So you're like, I'm gonna jump straight to it. So we got this cannabis situation going on.
We do.
We spoke about it a couple weeks ago. You've been fighting hard for whatever it is that's coming. Tell us what's coming. Tell us what you've been working on the last couple of weeks and what citizens can expect.
Yep. Okay. So let me go big picture, and then I'm gonna walk back. So about 3 years ago, I approached one of my colleagues. Her name is Representative Kelly Cassidy, and she was working on. This was like the very, very beginning stages. Like I was hearing it. She was going to introduce cannabis legislation to make it legal in Illinois. And I approached her and I'm like, look, I'm seeing what's happening around the country in other states. And if this is what you're going to do, you're going to run with it. Because she'd already run like the decrim bill 2.5 years ago that allowed felonies used to be capped at like 30 grams. They went up to 500 grams. That was 2.5 years ago. So she was working on that. And I respect pride of authorship. And so she was like, this was the next phase of it. And I approached her. I'm like, look, if you're going to do this, we got to do this together. Because what I know and what I'm seeing happening in other states that are legalizing, they're one, they're doing it through ballot measure. Two, the industry doesn't look like us. So an industry that has been used for more than 80 years to disenfranchise our community, to use as a reason to for people not to get jobs, not to get housing, to have their communities divested in. This very product we're now talking about legalizing, we have to do this with a particular equity lens to make sure that you have black ownership from seed to sale. You have to ensure that folks that have been criminalized by cannabis convictions in the past, they have to have a remedy that is easy to access, that has to be on the table, because you can't have some people who are facing convictions and or in jail or prison for a product that other people are getting rich off of.
Rich.
That can't happen. And then we also, if we're talking about this from a taxation perspective, and the bill is adult use taxation and regulation of cannabis. So if we're talking about taxes, then we need to talk about where those resources go. Where does that money go? And specifically, we need to make sure that a chunk of that money is coming back into the very same communities that cannabis was used to terrorize for decades and decades. And so that became the premise of our conversation. We started traveling around the country, we started off in Colorado, we started off in Denver to see what was happening. And every place that we would go, I was always the one to talk about equity. And I would say, well, what does the industry look like in terms of diversity? And they would always make it real clear, it's not. And when I would ask the question why, it's because they didn't try. It wasn't a priority. It wasn't important. So the things that you work on in policy, you work on it because it's important. And I don't think that in that moment or in that season, voices were stepping up or voices weren't at the table that really cared about this issue. And I care about this issue. I care about people that have been impacted in a harmful way having the ability to, one, be a part of this industry, and number two, be able to get relief, and three, our communities need to be rebuilt. And part of the rebuilding of our communities with intentionality, there has to be a direct nexus between this work and the good that comes of it. So that's where we started. And last Thursday? Last Thursday was a culmination of about 3 years of work that went into making what has been touted by Forbes, by so on and so many news outlets as the most socially equitable, criminal justice centered cannabis legalization policy in the country.
In Illinois. That's
forefront.
That's dope. That's dope. And I know you're super proud of this. And in addition to the people that have been, wrongfully, or not really wrongfully accused, but because it was illegal at the time, but the people that are just suffering from almost still legalization because they're still locked up. Mm-hmm. Why was this near and dear to you?
So about around the same time, I started doing work through doing expungement summits here locally, because when I came into office, I came through fire and brimstone. You were around during that season. It was very difficult, and what was used to try to hold me back was a mistake that I made when I was 18 years old. And folks tried to use that and leverage that as a means to castigate me to the side, to say that I didn't matter, my voice didn't matter. And the people of this community had my back. and they said, you know what, you're not perfect, but you're perfect for us. And they sent me to represent anyways. And so I've never lost that. I've never forgotten that, to know that this community could like have me just as I am. And I've always carried that. And so a lot of the policies that I work on is I represent imperfect people, because I'm imperfect. And I know that imperfect people need a voice. Mm-hmm. They need people to speak to their issues. And so when we started the Expungement Summit work, it became very clear to me who was being impacted, who was being convicted of these crimes. And it wasn't everybody. It was people that looked exactly like me, people that looked exactly like you.
The people that don't get equity out of this marijuana legislation in most of the country. Exactly.
And so all of the data points, though, show that usage between communities is the exact same. Right? So black people, brown people don't use cannabis any more than any other community. They just face the more harmful penalties. They face the convictions. They face the arrests. That's the difference. And so my colleagues, what I'm really proud of is that they were already dope chicks that get the space of equity. They don't walk it because they can't, right? And that's my lane, but they get it. And so working with a group of people that you don't have to explain like why equity is important.
Oh man.
We don't have to have a conversation from that standpoint. We just can talk about, we can get straight to, this is what we need. And here's how, and really that always became the issue. It wasn't, this is why we need it, but this is how we get it done. So
and real quick, while we're still on that, you mentioned a part of the reason why you wanted to jump on this bill is because to make sure that the money that goes out from the disenfranchised communities or the urban communities, that the money from cannabis goes right back into those communities. Now, we all know that whether you're talking about state government, federal, municipal government, getting money to go where we said we was about to put it from the beginning doesn't always work out that way. How are we going to ensure that the money from cannabis, especially the people that buy a good bulk of it, even though the numbers is, but how do we make sure that goes back into the community? So
you're absolutely right, and that was you literally might as well have been in those negotiating rooms, because that was one of the bigger issues. So the program that will then reinvest resources back into communities is called the R3 program: Recover, Renew, Reinvest, Renew. And these resources are going to go into the R3 fund. The R3 fund will have a governing board. The first iteration of that governing board will look a lot like a lot of the statutory boards, right? Like you have an appointment from the governor, one from the Senate president, one from the Speaker of the House, the minority leaders. That board, though, is going to be chaired by Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton.
Okay.
And there you go. Exactly. And I don't know if you know her, but for your listeners that don't know her, please go check her out. Just scroll through her Facebook page, scroll through her Instagram, scroll through her Instagram, and then Google her. And you can ask about her. She is 100% legit. She is for the community, she's from the community, she's about the community. And so her chairing that board, and then within 60 days, Lieutenant Governor Stratton, in consultation with that group, will then designate what the R3 areas are. And so again, this money is not to go to everybody. This money is to go back into communities that have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. So that board will then design what those R3 communities look like, that the money will then be reinvested into. Within that same 60-day time, there will be a selection of non-statutory board members, which just means they're just not the folks who are laid out by statute. But what we have required statutorily is that board be incredibly diverse. So just imagine this. Can you think of can you remember the last time the state board had a requirement of having male between the ages of 22 and 35 formerly incarcerated, female between the ages of 22 and 35 formerly incarcerated, and continue to member having served in a grassroots civil rights organization must be on the board. Like literally the next 17 people, it reads exactly like that. And so the reason why and this is all in the bill, right?
That's diversity.
Yes,
that's real diversity.
Exactly. And we did it like that with the intentionality of making sure we put real voices at the table that know how to, that are one, willing to speak up, speak truth to power, three, that are going to help steer the dollars back into communities, into organizations that really can make a difference in the community. One of the things, to Marcus's point, is that a lot of people talk about, okay, we're going to do this for the community, but somehow when the resources are made available, that help never actually gets to the community or to the people on the ground that are doing the real work. And so what we've done is we've created this board, this community reinvestment dollars that in a mature market, and the mature market is like 3 to 5 years, they will have an annual spend back into our communities for reinvestment of $125 million every year. And that is on top of the already existing investments that are going into communities. And so if you think about it, if you had 5 to 7 years of strategic investments going into specific areas, whether it be around violence prevention, economic development, legal aid, housing, you develop a plan as a community and say, listen, these are the pots of resources that we're going to go after to do this work for our community.
Consistently.
Yes, yeah. That's the piece.
That's the piece.
That's the piece, is that consistent, those consistent resources coming in, but then designing an entire plan for your community around it. So you're not like year to year begging for, to be able to keep doing what you're already doing, because that takes you off focus. That's like what we were talking about earlier. If you're always focused on trying to chase a dollar, it becomes hard to really connect to the work that you just really want to do. Like that's why you do what you do, is to get the work done. And so that is, to me, the three elements of this bill. And the reason why I showed up in the room to negotiate this bill was I showed up as my full, complete self, Jehan, black woman from Peoria, who represents a community that does not necessarily look like her, but that knows that I always carry Peoria on my back. And so I always want to do the things that are reflective of why folks send me down here or send me to Springfield. And the three areas that were most critical to me were always equity as it relates to community reinvestment. This is the biggest tax split that's ever been negotiated in any bill anywhere in the country. Automatic expungements. We're going to have over 770,000 convictions that are going to be automatically expunged. Automatic expungement.
That's the key word. Automatic.
Yes. So think about this. What is the percentage of people that you think just naturally go about and try to get their records expunged if they have a conviction on their record? What's the percentage? Like, how many people engage that process?
2%.
Yeah, 2%.
2%.
And that's just because they got somebody to let them know.
Yeah, somebody hollered at them.
Because most of the people ain't put them on game. Yeah.
It's 3.
Yeah.
Wow. So you guys were close.
Yeah.
We were close. Yes.
That's because you found that other third one.
Another one.
We all know one.
Yeah,
right. So that's why we had to. This couldn't be a process whereby you have the opportunity to expunge it, because then you got to wait for lawyers to get on deck to try to help folks get through individually. No, we're doing an expungement process that will be automatic. So if you never show up, this again, up to from 0 to 30 grams, and 0 to 30 grams up until 2.5 years ago, 30 grams was a felony 2.5 years ago. We changed that law 2.5 years ago up to 500 grams. If you're above 30 grams up to 500 grams, you have to still petition. But one of the things that we did as a result of my work in expungement here locally was I advocated, sidestep. Kim Fox in Chicago Cook County is in a different situation than everybody else in the state, right? Because they have their state's attorney, Kim Fox, is incredibly leaned into this space and wants to see that, the intent of this bill certainly is enacted upon. And so she's leaning into this. Judge Evans is leaning into this, as well as Clerk Brown. Not to say that other folks aren't leaning into this. They've just been more vocal and more out front about wanting to really be supportive in this space. And the reality is that they do have the majority of the convictions in Cook. Once you come outside of Cook, as you said, Cook is an anomaly. There's not going to be any other county, the other 101 counties, that are going to have the same process as Cook. So for all of the rest of us, what I've negotiated into this bill is statewide legal aid. So one of the things that we have a legal aid here, we have Prairie State Legal, but oftentimes they are stipulated, because they get federal resources, they are stipulated based on sort of what your income is, etc., whether or not they'll be able to serve you. What we've established as a part of, again, and it doesn't get talked about a lot just because there's so many pieces to talk about, is I negotiated statewide legal aid to go into this bill. So regardless of what, if you just come just above that economic threshold, you will still be able to have an attorney, be supportive of you in terms of not just handling the cannabis conviction, but if there are other convictions that one may have on their record, because the legal aid, they're not going to just only work on a cannabis conviction. If that's what you have, right? They're going to do your whole case. They're going to do your whole caseload. And
so it's a holistic criminal justice approach within this medical marijuana cannabis bill.
It is the biggest it is single-handedly the biggest criminal justice reform bill that's ever been passed anywhere in the country.
And that's why the odds is on Illinois right now. The odds is definitely on Illinois right now. Now, there's a lot of legislators, both Democrat and Republican, saying that this bill will impact the community in a negative way, saying that it's going to lead to more violence. You know what I'm saying? What is how do you feel about that?
I think that those folks are just operating from a bunch of junk science. It is the same reefer madness ideology that was used to vilify cannabis in the first place. I mean, when we do our research and we look at where did how did cannabis become the boogeyman? It was a very strategic decision made by people in position of authority and power to use cannabis as a means to vilify and demonize black and brown people. That's the history of cannabis. And so when people misguidedly quote those junk science stats, the reality of it is I hear them and I listen to them, but I know the reality. I know the real data in terms of what happens with usage when you legalize. Usage doesn't go up, it doesn't go down, it stays static. It's the same. People, if you don't participate in cannabis before legalization, chances are you won't do it afterwards, right? Like,
it's like smoking cigarettes. If you don't smoke, you know what I'm saying, you ain't gonna smoke it now. You know,
you're not gonna, if it's not your thing, it's not your thing. Everybody, because we can drink. If you're over 21, I know a lot of people that don't drink alcohol, and maybe somebody does, and they only do it, on their anniversary or something like that. Like, this is no different. And to be honest with you, it's far more safe for your body than either cigarettes or alcohol.
Facts.
That's the reality.
Yeah. Facts.
And I think when you're talking about kids, if there are folks who have brought up the issue of like children, the reality of it is name one kid that you know that does not know how to find marijuana. And as we know, living in Peoria last year, do you remember the folks that were using, I think it was K2?
Oh man,
and
we had a whole campaign about that.
Yeah. That's a real thing. And you know what that comes from? That's because that market, that industry, is not regulated. That's not going to happen with cannabis.
Yeah.
There are maximum THC limits that have been that are statutorily in the bill. You aren't going to. This product is from seed to sale is going to be tracked the entire time. Like, it is it's much better if you're concerned about what's going to happen in communities, then what you want to do is you want to put government right there in the middle of it, to tax it, to regulate it, to make sure that the folks that have access to it, it's tracked the entire time. So if there's a problem, so like with the K2 situation, nobody was held accountable for that.
That K2 situation was
people
crazy.
Was dying.
Dying in Peoria. That's not going to happen in cannabis, and if it does, you're going to know exactly the strain.
Yeah.
You're going to know exactly where it came from. The one thing about the medical industry in Illinois is it is considered like the gold star industry throughout the country. So we have 33 states that are have a medical program, 11 states now that will have a recreation program, and of all those states, the medical industry is considered the gold standard in terms of regulation, but it's not the gold standard in terms of diversity. They're like everybody else. The industry does not look like us. But that will not be the case when as it relates to adult use cannabis, because not only did we deal with the issue of the community reinvestment to help rebuild our communities, not only did we address the issue of expungements and as it relates to folks that are walking and living under the black cloud of having a conviction on your record, but then we're also addressing equity from the standpoint of what it means for someone to get into the industry. So
because that's what people want. They want jobs. Because I know a couple of people. We both know a couple of people that have migrated from Peoria to Colorado in search of marijuana or cannabis-related employment.
Yeah, I know some folks as well.
But we know that they're kind of keeping a lid on it as far as people in Illinois when it comes to access to jobs.
In terms of
just
in terms of the medical industry right now. Listen, the medical industry, that was the way the medical was handled.
You had to have bread.
Definitely had to have bread.
If you got bread, you had to have bread.
It was handled, first of all,
or know somebody with bread.
This is why I love the fact that you all in this space that you occupy. You like the Breakfast Club of Peoria in terms of being able to get the information to the people, to get the information to the culture, so that we know how to engage these issues. When it was time to do medical was sold under the auspices of, not as a business or an industry, but it was sold more so under the auspices of people being in chronic pain and having to take 27, 35 pills a day and having the side effects from those pills, when the reality of it is, if they could just have a medical cannabis card and be able to smoke legally, that many of their side effects would be managed much better. So again, in that time, which is why it's so important for you two and the public at large to be woke about situations, because the reason why we got to push for so much was because we were able to stand on your voices as it relates to what we have to have. So the idea of coming back with a recreational program that looked like that looked like medical, no go. To your point, if you wanted to get into medical, one, you had to have your real estate up front. So in order to apply, you already had to have ownership of real estate that you were going to use as a part of your grow operation, your sell operation, whether it was cultivation or dispensary.
And wasn't the application like $25,000 or something like that? You had to have $25,000 on hand or something like that already?
If not more. I think it was a little bit more. I think it was even a little bit more than that. In fact, I know it was more expensive than that. So what we're doing in this bill is that, from talking to cannapreneurs, that's what we call them, cannapreneurs.
Cannapreneurs. Write that down.
Around the country. First time you got to quote me. Second time it's yours.
I got you. Say less. Finna fix my resume.
So we talked to cannapreneurs, particularly black cannapreneurs and brown cannapreneurs around the country, and we found out from them sort of what were your issues and what were the impediments that you ran into and wanting to get into the space and into the industry. The top issues were having to have real estate in advance of the application, so you don't have to have that. If you are an equity applicant coming from a disproportionately impacted area, you do not have to have your real estate in advance. If you are a social equity applicant, half of your fees for the application are waived. Half of your fees are waived.
That's big.
If one of the other primary issues that black and brown cannapreneurs had around the country was the fact that they access to capital. So one of the bills that I ran this year was cannabis banking. A cannabis banking bill that would allow folks that participate in this space to actually be able to bank their money.
Right, because that was an issue.
It's a very big issue right now, because if you are in the cannabis industry, technically, cannabis is still a Schedule I drug. Schedule I drug would mean that cannabis is like heroin. Who believes that? Exactly.
A lot of people though, but yeah.
So
I don't know why.
It's because it was what we talked about 80 years ago, right? That there was a very real and distinct desire to otherize folks, and they used cannabis to do it. So at any rate, one of the primary issues was that folks wouldn't have access to capital. What we negotiated in this bill was a $30 million grant and revolving loan fund to assist social equity applicants in the building of their infrastructure, whether it's cultivation, a dispensary. So here are the licenses. So I'm talking about things that I haven't sort of teed up. The licenses that you can get under our recreational bill will be obviously cultivation. Those are the big boys.
Okay.
If you're going to get into cultivation, you probably already have a few coins to bump, right? Most people that are struggling to get in the game, you're not going to start a cultivation. Like, that's just a money game.
And you probably already been growing anyway.
And not in your basement.
You've probably been growing anyway.
That's a full-scale, multi-million-dollar operation.
Right.
Then you have your dispensaries. A cultivation operation can easily cost you $15-20 million. You have your dispensaries. Your dispensaries are typically going to be somewhere between $750 to maybe $1.5 million. Beyond, and we know the dispensaries are where people actually go to procure their purchases. Exactly. So underneath cultivation, dispensaries, you also have security. right? Security is another way for people to be able to get in the game.
Yes.
You may not be able to do cultivation or dispensary, but you may be able to build a security team that's licensed through the Illinois Department of Professional Regulations. Maybe you don't want to do security. Maybe what you want to do is you and some of your friends want to, put together a business plan and buy trucks and do transportation for the industry. Maybe that's not your thing. Maybe what you want to do is you want to go into craft grow, right? Like you want to be just almost think of craft grow the way you think of craft breweries, right? Like very special
type stuff.
Very specialized, very specialized specific strains, and you're like appealing to a very niche specific audience. In the way that you have your Goose. What is that beer called? It's like a
Goose Island.
Goose Island. Yeah, like that's a craft beer. So you'll have
Don't
folks,
judge me, y'all.
So you'll have folks like that in the cannabis space as well. And maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you want to do. Maybe you want to have like what's your favorite thing to bake?
I don't bake.
Throw me some cookies.
Salmon.
Boom. So yours is cookies. Yours is salmon. Maybe you have like this dope cookie recipe. Your grandma gave you this dope salmon recipe, and you just want to open up, your own shop doing like salmon and cookie infused.
Hey, that sounds fun.
Salmon and cookie infused items, right?
Yeah.
So the license that would allow one to do things like that would be a processor. An infuser license, right? You're infusing you're infusing different products, and like those are all specialty licenses. Those licenses require, an investment, right? Invest in yourself. Like who always says that? Biggs always says invest in yourself. Bet on your Jeezy, bet on yourself. These are opportunities for people who believe in themselves to bet on themselves. We've created an environment that should be conducive for folks to get in the game and find their little niche and work it, right? And continue to work it until you can go to something else. We tried to do this in a way. One of the things that other states did was everything was vertically integrated. So there weren't all of these specialty on-ramps to allow one to be able to get into the industry.
Yeah, just one way in.
Right, one way in, one way out.
You got up once you get in, but you can't get in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the very first things. So this was a significant learning process for me because I didn't know anything when I started this journey. I didn't know a lot about the cannabis space, but one of the things I learned from the business side of these things is that the only way to ensure diversity is that we have to make sure that these operations are not vertically integrated to give people more on-ramps to be able to get into the game. Another piece that we negotiated in the bill, because I kept saying like, man, like I get it, like we have this from cultivation all the way down to an infuser license, but my concern is what about like Miss Jane on the block who she's just interested in the space, like she wants to learn more about cannabis. She wants to learn more about the cannabis industry. She wants to be able to engage the process. How does Ms. Jane find her way into this space if she knows nothing? So one of the other pieces that we negotiated into the bill was the opportunity for community colleges to be able to run their own cannabis curriculum.
They went already above and beyond.
Cannabis curriculum, yes. So literally you'll be able to go to. I mean, they have to apply, but ICC, right? I'm just using ICC as an example. You'd be able to go to ICC to learn the cannabis industry. You'd also be able to get hands-on experience, and you would be able to learn how to grow at ICC. So, right, you may not do any of those other things that I discussed before, but you just want to learn about the space. Maybe it's a business that you'd like to get into later on in life, but you have to know the industry that you're getting into before you get into it. That's yet another on-ramp for people to learn the business, learn about the industry, and actually learn how to grow actual plant.
In championing this bill, how important would you say it has been to have a governor that understands how explosive this industry can be?
It's everything. I mean, if you look at many of our past governors, Democrat or Republican, I don't think that any of them would have pushed this policy in this way. And it's not like, and I'm not speaking ill about any of them. I'm just talking about their policy stance on positions. And sometimes you have folks that are more conservative than others. I think that JB is, as our governor, has been up until this point everything that I hoped that he would be.
He is doing everything he was talking about.
Everything he said.
I gotta get to him.
Listen,
he is doing everything he was talking about.
Do you remember? Do y'all remember we in Peoria? We had the first criminal justice reform and equity gubernatorial debate.
Yeah.
Was that a year ago? About a year and a half. It was January of 2018. We had that debate down at WTVP. It was the only place in downstate Illinois, and it was the first debate where the only issues that were on the table were justice reform issues. This was one of the issues. This was one of the questions that I asked at that debate was, where do you all land on cannabis legalization? And Dan Biss and JB both answered the question well, but I felt like JB answered the question in a way that made me feel like he's not just talking about this, but he's serious about getting this done, because the depth by which he was able to speak to the issue, I knew that this wasn't like a talking point that a staffer handed to him and said, this is polling well, say this. I know that when I hear it, and I know that wasn't what he was saying.
And he understood the business. So, I mean, it was several billion. So, I mean, he understood the business. Hey, real quick, I see on the back of your thing, you was champion a long time. Show the back of the phone to the camera. Real quick. Hey, listen.
Bam.
Illinois state government legal trapping on these bills. We legal trapping on the bills. We trapping these bills. Real quick, if you just now tuning in to the radio, man, 90.7 FM WAZ Peoria, we have State Rep Jehan Gordon-Booth in the building talking to us about the cannabis bill that she helped sponsor, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Now, for the people that's listening, I know we probably circling around too much. Everybody listening wants to know, when can we smoke and not get in trouble?
And not get in trouble.
Not when can they smoke and not get in trouble?
Excuse me. They can smoke January 1st, 2020 legally.
And so is this a beer situation where you can't be outside, or what does this look like?
So a lot of this, it'll be interesting, right, to see how this rolls out. But ultimately, it's not legal. This is yet another good space. I'm going to go back to that. It is not legal to consume outdoors. So one of the issues that we also had a lot of conversation around was, so have you ever gone to a state where cannabis was legal?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that you'll see, and I'm not going to ask you.
I said yeah.
So I'm not going to ask if you partook. I'm not asking that question. No. What I will say though is that what you are seeing in a lot of states is that you don't have social places of consumption, right? Like a place to consume, like a bar.
Yeah.
So
hookah lounge or something like that.
Exactly. And so what we did in the bill, we negotiated. The issue that I put on the table is this: look, if you can only consume indoors, right? That means that we are about to make a product legal that technically is illegal to consume anywhere other than technically your middle class home with a yard,
which is the same degree that we had years ago anyway.
Right?
It's illegal, but that's what you was doing anyway.
So what happens is, if it's not legal, because if you live in an apartment, you live in government housing, if you live in a building, chances are, even though it's a legal product, you can't smoke in those spaces. So the issue is, you have to have social consumption. You have to have social consumption places for people to consume this product.
That's what I want a license for. I want a license for that one.
So here's how this is going to be handled. That'll be handled by the local level. The local level will have local zoning. No. This is, again, that's why this is not going to be our last conversation. This is our first conversation about this space, because we have to make sure that people are informed about what we did, number one, why it's important, and why it's important for people to step into this space. So this isn't just like Jehan is talking about this. Now we all should be talking about this, because how this is implemented will be local zoning. So having relationships with local city council folks, their zoning boards, that's going to be very important now, because they will then be making the decisions on where dispensaries can be located and how social consumption spaces are going to be handled and managed and dealt with at the local level. And so you can't have a product. If a city, we gave cities the ability, if you ever heard of like a dry town, if a town wants to be dry, they can be dry. that means you don't get the revenue from said items. And we know typically what happens in dry towns, people go to the next town over and buy and take it back to the dry town. I don't know. I'm sure there will certainly be cities throughout the state that will say, we don't want that here. I don't know what Peoria will do. My hope is that Peoria would not be that far in the dark ages, like act as if this is not a very real industry that people are participating in.
I was just going to
now.
ask you, how much faith do you have in the city of Peoria to execute this bill the way you envisioned it?
It's really not. It's not the entirety of the bill, but just this specific space. What I have faith in is I have faith in folks like you to continue to lean into this issue. I have folks in where we are as a community in terms of people who are willing to raise their voices and to not allow status quo to be the source of, opinion for the day. Like, we're going to have to continue to push past status quo. And so, I have a lot of faith that we're going to do exactly what the people demand. And that's what folks have to know. People in positions of power do what people demand that they do. If you don't demand anything, you're not going to get anything. But if you demand it, you demand to have your voice at the table. And here's the reality. If this was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, this would be like this groundbreaking thing that we was like stepping out there. Yeah. The reason why it passed with Democrats and Republicans voting for it in the House and Senate is because this is polling around 70% statewide. 70, not quite. It's like 68%. It's polling favorable. So this is not.
It's a reaction. Government is oftentimes reaction.
100%. Yeah. And trust me, if this was polling low, it wouldn't have happened. You wouldn't have had Republicans voting for it. You would not have had conservative Democrats voting for this bill if this was viewed as this thing that was just so scary and so, so overly progressive. It's really not. You have states like Vermont and Alaska who are legalizing cannabis as well. What folks are seeing is that this is a real industry. The whole country of Canada that sits on top of us is now legal. There's nothing that anyone can do to stop recreational cannabis. It's not going anywhere. So what we should do as a state that clearly has some issues as it relates to criminal justice, we clearly have some issues as it relates to taxes. Why keep saddling people with taxes and more taxes and more taxes? Why don't we find innovative and creative ways of, one, decriminalizing, and not just decriminalizing, but legalizing a choice that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people are making anyways, and tax it, regulate it, make it more safe, put the government right there in the middle of it, reduce youth use, which that's what's happening in every other state where you've had legalization. The only age group where you see a consistent uptick in the usage are individuals between the ages of 55 and 70.
Get it in there.
Like, hold on.
Hey, but think about it.
That makes sense, though.
Those are Woodstock kids.
Woodstock kids, and not only that, the people that didn't partake probably early on just because, the stigma and everything like that, and they're older, where they at the point where like they kind of might not even care, or they've been wanting to do this forever, and now they see seeing it's more okay, and people are doing what they've been wanting to do for forever.
That's it. And you also have
medical properties to it.
There you go. It's you have folks in that age group. There's a woman, lovely church woman that I know, who said to me about a month ago, she says, "Girl, I need y'all to get that done down there." I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "I'm talking about cannabis." I said, "Oh, what are you talking about?" She says, "I needed, when I was in another state," and I'm not going to say who because I don't want anybody to know me to like put two and two together, but she said, "I partook and I couldn't believe how good I felt." She said, and it's just a shame that the medicines that they're putting me on make me feel like this. And see, her ailment isn't covered under medical cannabis. So although we have a medical cannabis industry, everybody that has ailments and concerns that cannabis could impact still can't access it. And so that's why she was pushing for this. But you have a lot of folks in that 55 to 70 age group that have friends who have aches and pains, who are being satiated by a plant that grows from the ground.
Yeah, natural. My mom still ain't going, but it just is what it is.
Listen, your mom is like my dad. My dad is, a lot of folks know this. My father is battling cancer, and he's been battling cancer for a long time now. And this is his third stint with cancer, and he is in a lot of pain on a regular basis. I'm like, Daddy, just smoke a joint. And he's, girl, please, I ain't doing that stuff.
And some people, just to save their life, they will have to think about it.
Yeah, I agree. It's a generation shift for a lot of folks, and so that's okay, right? I mean, because those folks they grew up in. Have you all ever seen Reefer Madness?
No.
You gotta watch. You gotta watch. You have to watch. It's a old school propaganda flick that was created to. It was done in a way in order to vilify cannabis and anyone that participated in cannabis, right? And so it was something that was widely passed around probably 40, 50 years ago. And so if you watch, you have to watch required watching for the summer is you got to go to Netflix. You have to watch Reefer Madness, but you also have to watch Fab Five Freddy's Go Greener.
Okay, I got to get those from you.
You have to do those two.
Oh, I'm definitely checking
in that order.
Definitely checking that one out.
So when we talking about this, one big thing is budget. How big of an impact do we think that marijuana is going to have on the budget overall? Strictly Hip Hop listening, man. If y'all here, we got kids in the background, man. We got kids
definitely
up here.
We
definitely got kids here, man. We got kids. But how big of an impact are we thinking that this is going to help with budget? Because we already know taxes are going up depending on what happens with voters and with the 2021 thing.
Yeah.
Pensions still need to be paid out. People still need to be taken care of. We still broke. Jobs are still crazy. What do we think the marijuana is going to do for us?
So the estimated budget, the budget impact for cannabis will be around $500 million, $5 to $560 million into the overall budget. Within that $5 to $560, you're going to have, again, 25% of that coming off the top to reinvest into our communities, 20% of that going into mental health and behavioral health supports. Mental health mental health has been absolutely decimated over the last 15 years. I mean, we all know somebody or have a family member who has been challenged with mental health issues, and it is devastating what families have to go through. And so there's the desire, there's no real connection, although people try to make connections between cannabis and mental health. The reality of it is that what we know is this is an opportunity for us to sort of use that stigma as a way of putting an additional down payment on rebuilding the mental health infrastructure throughout the state. And so the remainder of it, so you have 25% coming back to our communities, 20% going to mental health services, mental health, behavioral health services, 2% being spent on a public education campaign. So in the same way that the reason why you have all these public campaigns on like cigarettes is because there was money put behind sort of the campaign around what cigarettes really do, how they're actually harmful to young developing minds or to folks' bodies. That same thing will be done with cannabis. So there will be a big push not to basically tell the truth about what it is. Is it a harmful product for someone under the age of, for a growing developing mind? No one with a growing developing mind should be participating in cannabis, liquor, say anything.
Oh, really? Right.
So this will end up. So if we extract, the reinvestment money, the mental health money, the education money, the public education money, we're still talking about $250-300 million. That'll be going into the budget.
Awesome.
Yep.
That's great. You've been tuning in to Strictly Hip Hop 90.7 FM, WAZU Peoria. Hit us up, DJ_Lavish or Mark_Supreme. What's your social media out there for him?
Instagram, Jehan Gordon-Booth. Facebook, Jehan Gordon-Booth. Twitter, Rep JGB.
Word, okay. On Twitter, you got
Rep JGB.
You got your check mark?
No,
you better get your check mark.
Okay, I probably get a check mark.
You deserve a check mark.
Definitely need that check mark.
You definitely need a check mark.
That's I have a to-do list for summer.
That gotta be
number 17 is gonna be get the check mark.
Yeah, you gotta get that check mark.
I got a to-do list too since I've been in here for the last 30 minutes. Oh yeah. We definitely get some cracking.
So shifting gears real quick, because I wanted to holler at you, and I know we running a slight short on time, but one of the another major topic of conversation across the United States, in addition to medical marijuana and cannabis in general, is all these abortion laws for the different states going on, and everybody got they say so. I don't want to speak on it because I don't got those organs. Lav ain't got them organs. Our cameraman ain't got the organs. So we want to holler somebody that is a woman that is involved in the legal process. What is your take on what all the states are doing? And is Illinois in the right position? Are we going the wrong way? Do we need to sponsor something new? Are they doing the wrong thing? What we got going on?
No, thank you for giving my uterus this platform to speak.
I know that's right.
Go ahead.
But I think that what we're doing, we've had a lot of years in Illinois that we've been embarrassed, right, about our budgetary process, many of the things that were happening in the state. This year this is probably the year that I am most proud of in terms of the policies that we were actually able to get over the line. A really important piece of reproductive health legislation that I was proud to co-sponsor was the Reproductive Health Act that was also passed last week that essentially doesn't allow Illinois to roll back, because one of the concerns that you see, I mean, states as close as Missouri, you are seeing literally the right for a woman to choose what is best for her body be demonized and go from being illegal healthcare decision to literally sending women to back alleys, not allowing women to have agency over their body and the choices that they want to make for themselves. I mean, the idea that is even an option in 2019 is almost unbelievable, and I'm proud to live in a state that is willing to step in the gap for women and say, we trust you to make your own decisions for yourself, for your family, for your body. If you don't want to bring a child into this world, don't. What blows my mind, though, is the hypocrisy between folks.
Man, these lawmakers been talking real greasy, and they got mad skeletons in 2 closets.
And I'm gonna let you say that
they have behind them too, though.
This is a very real space. But what I would say is, many of these same folks that want to demonize the woman having the right and ability to make choices and have agency over her own body are the same individuals that when we're talking about mental health services, when we're talking about reinvesting in communities, when we're talking about the resources, the educational resources that children need in our communities to be able to receive a quality education, these are the same folks that refuse to provide basic level support to children, right?
Yes.
To children in our community. So miss me with the overzealous, hyperbole about how much you care when that child is a child when they get here too, that needs access to resources, that needs a supportive government.
And y'all never pull it up. That is facts. That is facts.
But somehow when we're having those conversations about investments in children, investments in communities, investments in parents to help them actualize their best lives, they don't want any part of that. So listen, to have a conversation with me, you have to be intellectually consistent on both sides.
I feel that.
To start there.
I felt more off that than the cannabis situation.
Because that was real.
Yes, that's crazy.
That's definitely real, and for somebody to say that a woman can't, handle her body, what I'm saying? If she feels like she's not ready, then she's not ready. And there's a lot of situations that's out there, I'm saying, when you're speaking on rape,
incest,
incest, and if you don't want to have the baby, I'm saying, what's best for you. You know what I'm saying? So I totally agree. Shout out to Illinois, man, for being a progressive state on this, man.
Yeah, we do a couple things right, man. We do a couple things right. What we just had, which just seems like yesterday, we just had city council at large elections. I know you work statewide, but what's your thoughts on what's going on in Peoria, and what did you make of the recent elections?
As you know, Marcus has known me for a long, long time. We go all the way back to ICC. In the early 2000s, and so
them was the early 2000s.
Those were baggy clothes.
Early
baggy clothes and white ones.
Ain't nothing else to say.
Baggy clothes and white ones.
And maybe a jersey on below.
That was the era. So Chingy was a thing.
Yeah.
Right. So that's early 2000s. It wasn't like 01. It was like 06, 07.
It was. That's what I'm saying. Late 2000s.
Yeah.
That was late. Yeah.
Listen.
Early as 05 and before. Don't date me, man.
Listen, if that's what you say, I'll give it to you. But obviously, I was elated to see my OG, my mentor, Rita Ali, get elected to city council.
Beautiful.
I think that when she ran the first time at large and she lost by 1 vote, it was incredibly disheartening to a lot of us. But what I knew was that she had the goods, because the district, I don't think people really recognize how monumental that race was, because she ran in a district that was like 68% Republican. That's a very District 5 is a very, very conservative district, and she almost won. So to me, I mean, I had a lot of faith.
I'm trying to get like that. Y'all ain't in the studio. But keep going.
I had a lot of faith that she would get elected this time, because one, we need her, right? And the community needs her. And I remember even in that race that there were a lot of folks in the community that wanted to vote for her but couldn't vote for her because they didn't live in the 5th district. And so her having the ability to run citywide, it just made me proud to see people that I don't typically see engaged in the legislative process getting engaged, because this has been a space for far too long, has not had the level of diversity. And when you don't have that level of diversity, that means you don't get enough people at the table to really shift the conversation in a real way. And so I was incredibly excited to see Rita run. I was excited to see Andre run. He didn't make it to council, but his career is just getting started. He's definitely gonna be representing us in some public body in the very, very near future. I'm sure of it. He had a lot of good ideas. Peter Kovac was an exciting candidate. I liked what he talked about. I liked the energy that he brought to the table. I think the more that we are looking to diversify and electrify our base, the more people, one, that you're going to get engaged to come out, right? If you see people on the ballot that are speaking to the issues that you care about, that care about the issues that you care about, and long before they decide to run for office, you see them, right? So you and I both, we all know, long before Rita ran for office, Rita was doing
in these streets.
Is, and will always be
in these streets.
That's it. And so I would say that because of voices like yours, you all have the ability to hold elected officials accountable in the way that I haven't seen in this community ever, right? Or at least I won't say ever, because there was a whole lot that happened long before us, right? But in terms of in my time in this space, there's not been a platform and an ability to really speak to the community's issues in the way that you do. So I want you all to know how proud I am of you to see you all hosting your own debates and done in an incredibly classy way, and really getting creative with it in a way that even the more traditional media outlets had tons of respect for what you all were able to do, and you were able to put the issues on the table that real people want to hear about. That just hadn't happened, right? That hasn't happened over the years, and so you're doing that, and I want you to continue to lean into that, because that's your power.
We appreciate that, man. Straight up, that's showing love right there. Now, in 2018, J.B. Brister appointed you to be a part of the Restorative Justice and Safe Communities Committee. What is this committee, and what does it do to help Illinois?
So essentially what we did was, it was myself, State's Attorney Kim Fox, and Congresswoman Robin Kelly. We were all designated and appointed to chair that committee. That committee consists of about 35, 45 people from around the state that came together. We hosted a series of meetings. Those meetings largely were held in Chicago. And the issues, we were really looking to create a sort of a blueprint as it relates to the issues that the governor should be working on, not just in his first year, but looking at, okay, what are the things that we can get accomplished, like legislatively? What are the criminal justice reforms? What are the safety priorities that we have as a community? What can we get? Number one, what's important? You had a number of folks in that group, so I chaired it. So it was my job to make sure that everybody was being heard. And so you had people that are on the ground, grassroots, don't do a bunch of important meetings in these shiny spaces, but they're doing the real work. But then you also had like some of these organizations that get funded hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars a year to do that work. They may be more shiny and professionalized, but it doesn't make them any more effective than somebody who doesn't have all that. And so what we found in that was that there are a lot of folks that are doing the work that are not getting the resources. That if you could just get them the resources to do the work that they're already doing and that they're good at, we would actually be getting a better result and a better return on the investment. So a lot of that work, what it has helped me to do this year and carrying over into the legislative season, is it helped to inform me as it relates. So for example, like that, thinking about the stories that I heard in the transition team that I chaired was what made me fight to make sure that Juliana was sitting square in the middle of the R3 program to make sure that we weren't creating this pot of funds that's basically going to continue to go to the same people that have been getting resources. The goal is to make sure that people on the ground that are doing the work that can have the most impact on the most people who need these services or who need these supports, that they're actually getting it. And so, just like there was those kinds of things that were happening as a part of this larger process. One of the pieces on our agenda to-do list was to make sure that we pass cannabis legalization, and we did.
It happened. That's what's popping.
What's your future look like? You've been state rep for a minute. You run unopposed a lot of the time.
Hey, now don't.
I ain't calling nobody to come through. You know what I'm saying? I think everybody's scared. I think everybody's scared for it.
I'm not saying that. I had 3 hard campaigns.
Do you really want to go up against Jehan though?
No,
not you, just anybody. Listeners, like, do you really want to run against Jehan in the P right now?
I'm telling you. Listen, if I do, I have to do now.
Yeah.
But don't tempt people, because trust me, people have time on their hands.
Yeah.
And I don't.
I know, but you got them gloves. Them gloves ain't dusty though. Them gloves ain't dusty.
I'm not going there. I'm not letting you pull me into this.
Yeah. I just want to see you whip somebody in the debate real quick.
Listen, I do what I have to do, but I don't.
Don't make me suit up, fam. Don't make me suit up.
You boot up real quick.
But cool right now, or have you thought about? Like,
I would say that I enjoy being able to represent Peoria. I enjoy being a wife. I enjoy being a mom. I enjoy being able to have impact on my community. So what my future holds, obviously God knows, but I know that the work that I do will always, the work that I will continue to do will always have to allow me to have impact on the community. I don't want to do I'm not going to be happy if I can't do that. And so I don't know, to be honest with you. Like I don't know, and I'm not being coy, but I do know that I'm enjoying being able to do the work that I have the ability to do right now. Because when I first got in this game, I was very young. I had I had a very rough 3 to 5 years, right? Like a bunch of tragedies in my life, back to back, major deaths in my life that really were a challenge for me. And I'm just going to be very honest, it was very, very challenging. So I have a lot of love and respect for people who are grieving and that are dealing with challenging situations, but like still showing up every day, still trying to press forward and do what they have to do in spite of feeling like they're crumbling on the inside. I know what that feels like. And so I feel like I've been doing this now for 10 years, but it doesn't feel like 10. I think that first 3 to 5
it has been about
it has. But that first 3 to 5 years for me really just felt like a blur.
Yeah.
A blur sometimes of sadness. But even then, I was still working, right? I was still passing bills, getting things done. But the ability to do this kind of work that I'm doing right now, this work is what I'm most passionate about. This work is, for me, this is legacy work.
Yes, especially this cannabis joint. Yeah, for sure.
This is for me, and that's why I want to.
So you kind of feel like you just started almost, like you just getting started.
I do. I want to enjoy this moment where we have a seat. We have a real seat at the table. This year, I was promoted to deputy majority leader. So right now, I'm the highest ranked male or female outside the city of Chicago.
Some slight. Okay. Some slight.
All right. And it's an honor to be able to be a black woman in that space. And in Illinois' 201 year history, we've never had a black woman serve in the top spot in the House. My good girlfriend Kim Lightford is the majority leader in the Senate, and so right now what you're seeing a lot of particularly black women rising to very real positions of power.
Yeah, it's true.
In government, and I think that this is a moment that I don't know if we'll ever get this moment again, and so I think that we have to make our time count.
Most def. You a couple more things before you head out. I saw that you appreciated the Nipsey article that I did when I went out to LA, which means a lot to me just for you to see my work. So I appreciate that. What did Nipsey, his music, and his death mean to you?
So I've always been. I'm born in the '80s, raised in the '90s. So the music that speaks most to my spirit is the music that I grew up listening to, grade school, high school, college. Like that's what speaks most to my spirit. What speaks to my spirit is hip hop. And Nipsey early on, to me, like I've always been like an East Coast girl in terms of like music, but I felt that Pac really isn't West. He'd made some West Coast records, but Pac isn't West Coast.
You don't go back like that, okay? Okay.
Right, he's not like West Coast. Yeah. Like most West Coast music, I didn't like. It really wasn't my thing. Other than maybe again, Pac doesn't count. Maybe Lil Dog Pound from the early '90s. Yeah. Cube, Dre, like the big folks. But there's a lot of sort of like West Coast music that I just really didn't mess with.
So you rock with the Bay Area with E40?
Again, like not really. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm familiar. I'm very familiar, but not like Too Short though. Yes. Right?
Yeah, you gotta rock with him.
But he's, again, like there's a difference between like even the people that I'm naming, Short, Dre, Cube, Ren, like all of these folks are like the legends. And you can be into like a legends music, but not necessarily be into like what West Coast music is. And what I like so much specifically about Nipsey was that his music was definitely West, but it gave me like an East Coast vibe in terms of like the stories that he would tell. The reason why I love East Coast music so much is because I feel like I get stories that are told through the music, and to me that's what Nipsey did. And even more so than the music, I liked the stuff that I would read about Nipsey, the different interviews that I would see Nipsey doing, which then only reinforced the music even more. Right? And so I've always liked, like my favorite rapper of all time is
Jay.
Yeah,
paint picture with words. That came from an interview we did about 10 years ago. Dang, we old. You old.
So it's still to this day, same old Jay. Yeah. Right? But
just a billionaire. But
just a billionaire.
The same old Jay.
Just a Billy.
So to me, he gave like, in terms of coolness, in terms of vibe, and the energy that he was on, it was a very like Jay-centered approach to the economics of a community, all the while having like this coolness vibe that Snoop had, but then he also had this storytelling ability in his music in the way that East Coast rappers had that I always liked. So when he got killed that Sunday, was it in March?
Yeah, March 31st.
I
remember where I was at. I remember where I was at.
It was me too. It was devastating, right? Yeah. Because when I think about the things that particularly in the midst of this work. So one of the organizations that I do a lot of the criminal justice reform work with is an organization called Alliance for Safety and Justice. And Nipsey was supporting the organization's Time Done campaign around much of the same work that I do around expungement. And in California, they call it Time Done. And so Nipsey was willing to help like sort of jump off that movement in California by doing a free concert for people to really get the message out about why it's so unfair for people to be saddled with the collateral consequences of convictions for the remainder of their lives. And so seeing somebody who understood this movement around criminal justice reform and who understood the power of rebuilding your own community and buying back the block, knowing how to take a platform and double it, triple it, and make it so much more to benefit and impact so many other people. When he was killed, it was devastating. It was absolutely devastating because a lot of the things that he was doing, he and Dave Gross, with what they were doing with like Vector 90 and Our Opportunity, I was watching it from afar, getting ideas about things that we could be doing here, because we have to this energy that we bring. And when I say we, meaning you have we as a people, we have a special energy that we bring to the table, and that energy can be powerful in terms of impacting and changing the lives of people. And so when I saw someone that moved so much of the culture had their life taken down in front of the very business that they own, it was just it made you stop in your tracks for a minute, right? Because if you're a good person, you put out good energy,
you're supposed to come back.
It's supposed to come back in that same way, and that didn't happen for him. One of the things that I have found myself talking about significantly, why am I keep playing with this? Significantly is the fact that, like, I fight so much to make sure that, like, folks are getting opportunity, that folks and communities are not being left behind. But it's not because when I look around this community that I'm in, this community that I'm from, it's not because I see tons of business owners that are doing this very thing that I'm advocating for people to be able to do. But to me, listening to the stories of Nip, listening to Jay for all my life, like, to me, it is their words that have made me want to continue to fight for the industrious young man or the industrious young woman that all they really need and want is an opportunity. They just need somebody who gets that they want an opportunity to kind of open that up a little bit so that they can get in. And to me, he embodied everything that we're talking about as it relates to community reinvestment, when we're talking about expungement, when we're talking about ownership. That's Nip. Like, that's who he was.
That's super facts.
That's like, listen, when I was giving my floor speech, I almost ended by saying the marathon continues.
Man, listen.
Man, hey,
I've been responding to emails, professional emails. I've been sliding it in, fam. I've been sliding it in. I have.
Listen. And I didn't do it because I'm like, this is not a gimmick.
Yeah.
And I didn't want, because sometimes when people insert some stuff,
it got to be tasteful.
Yeah. And I didn't want it to be that, so I didn't. But it was I was like, do I do it? Let's go.
When we coming in the victory lap of this legislation, all I need
you to do is, straight up.
I'd have slid.
We'll find something prolific to do.
see, you know what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying?
Y'all can make me get talk like Nip.
I love it.
We've been having a whole lot of violence hitting the Peoria area right now. Talking about maybe the 4-year-old baby that ended up getting killed. You know what I'm saying? 22 shots ringing out on the north end the very next day. I see that you came up with, in I think 2016, you came up with a Neighborhood Safety Act. You care to elaborate on that real quick?
Sure. So the Neighborhood Safety Act is designed to decrease the Illinois Department of Corrections headcount by 25% in the next 7 years. So we're talking about thousands of men and women coming home early as a result of being able to have access to programming and sentencing credits. One of the things that we do in many of our corrections facilities around the state, around the country, is that folks are going to departments of corrections and not being corrected at all.
Man.
Right? And that's a
whole nother day.
Y'all going into the big stuff.
That's what we do. We allow us to do that.
Yeah. And so I would say that the highlights of the Neighborhood Safety Act, decreasing Department of Corrections headcount by 25% in the next 7 to 8 years, giving judges judicial discretion to be able to, when they see cases that come before them, oftentimes judges' hands have been tied behind their backs and not being able to weigh in with what they think is the more appropriate sentence, as opposed to having a stiff statutory requirement. We've seen that in numerous cases where, particularly around the country, where you have judges who literally on the bench will say, I would not want to do this. I don't think that this sentence is appropriate, but by law,
and
the sentence
mandatory minimums. Yes.
So within this legislation, I was able to reduce over 2,200 mandatory minimums in the state of Illinois. 2,200 mandatory minimums.
Talk about making changes.
Eliminated them. Eliminated 2,200 mandatory minimums. Gave judges judicial discretion. Like I already said, provided sentencing credits for the Department of Corrections, and then we also created the trauma recovery centers. We have we have them all over the city. They have one on Pecan Street, right across from River West. There's one in Tree Wind. There's one in Manual. So they're in multiple sites around the state, and the idea around trauma recovery centers is when you are impacted by crime, violence, trauma, in the same way that you are impacted if you hit your arm and you cut your arm, you have to provide some level of attention to that cut that you see. But when folks are impacted by crime and violence and trauma, there's also a pain there. You just don't see it. And so trauma is they oftentimes show up, literally a trauma that is a brain that has experienced trauma looks different than a brain that has not experienced trauma.
Yeah, physically changed.
It physically changes people. Mm-hmm. And so the goal of trauma recovery centers is to be able to deal with sort of the wounds of the soul. So people having the ability to access mental health counseling, behavioral health counseling, having access to be able to deal with mental health counseling and training that oftentimes is not available in our communities, and particularly in a way that makes it easy to access it, right? Like not having to go downtown or not having to go out past the new mall. Why do we still call it the new mall?
Man,
I don't even know.
It's the new mall.
So having to go out by the new old mall. Having these services like right there in the community, right? So if you live on the south, you have the ability to go to Manual. You can go to Tree Wind. You can go to Pecan, and you can listen. Anyone from anywhere can can engage in those services. But we think it's important to center these services right in the heart of the community that is the most harmed, but also the least served.
That's dope. Man, you're doing a lot of stuff. So congrats on all the work. We appreciate all the work you're doing.
Thank you.
And I can kind of understand why you kind of dug your heels in where you're at right now, just because you got so much left to do and you've done so much. So I didn't know all this stuff was going on. You know, I keep my ear to the street a little bit, but I didn't know you was killing them like that. So that's dope. Anything else you want to say to the listeners while we got you on? Because our listeners obviously wanted to hear from you, so we appreciate your time.
Yeah, definitely. One, thank you for having me. Two, and I said it before, I just want to say it again. Keep leaning into this space that you clearly have been leaning into for some time. But like I feel like this year, not just last year, like you really like leaned into this political space and really like stepped up to the plate in a way that I think is gonna have the ability to change this community for the better. So my last comment, it will be nothing about me, but to continue to encourage you young brothers to continue to use your voice, continue to use this platform to inform people, to engage people who don't feel like there's a way to engage government. And at the end of the day, you have to use this platform and put folks right there in the middle of every conversation, and you are in a unique position to do that. And I honor you guys, and I appreciate you for it.
We appreciate you, man. Marathon continues.
The marathon continues.
Dig that, man. Lavish, man, I guess give us the track we finna slide on now.
Man, I'm gonna just say it like
we
this.
We went way over the
Can I pick the track?
Go ahead. What you want?
I want
Bust Down Tatiana? No,
not a chance.
Nipsey Hussle?
You know, I would, but no. We're gonna go out to Allure.
Allure?
Jay-Z.
Some Hove? I don't think I have Allure edited.
Okay, let's do let's go out to Legacy. That's like a newer one.
That's what we doing too.
Gonna do Legacy. Man, Jehan came in here, stomped me. Do you got Legacy?
Man,
it ain't edited. You know what I'm saying? That's all I can say.
There aren't a lot of cuss words in there.
We got it.
There's a few though.
I don't know where they at.
Because the reason why I know is because I don't my listening habits had to change when I had a baby.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah,
Like
when they around.
thank God for headphones. So I know that in the beginning, I think there are a few curse words because I like to make sure she's not out here saying misrepresenting the culture and out here saying stuff that she shouldn't say, because I'm the only one that listens to this kind of music. My husband is an R&B head, so I would definitely get blamed for any words that she said that she shouldn't be saying. So I make sure that I stay on top of that. Okay, so if you don't have that, how about volume Life and Times of Sean Carter, Volume 2. You only
She's
know.
a Jay-Z fan for real.
Oh, yeah, she is.
Because she's dropping down some heat. Y'all don't even know.
You only know what you see.
Why you look?
I'm pointing to you like, you got that one?
Look, I'm about to dig up some editors, man.
I got some editors right here, but
I'm about to dig up some editors. Hey, man, give him some. We gonna leave out the legacy, man. Go ahead, drop whatever. We about to leave out the legacy.
We gonna leave out the legacy.
Leave out the legacy.
You've been tuned in to Strictly Hip Hop 90.7 FM, WAZU Peoria. This is Lavish in Afternoons. I'm your host, DJ Lavish. Appreciate you rocking with us on this Wednesday afternoon. Once again, you've been tuned in to Strictly Hip Hop 90.7 FM, WAZU Peoria. Shout out to my man Smooth and Jehan Gordon for stepping into the building, man. Also, Solo Vision was definitely in the background making it happen. Y'all don't even know it. But y'all gonna see a nice little video coming up real soon. Strictly Hip Hop is brought to you in part by Rio's Pull Up and Print. He pulls up, you pay, he prints right there on the spot. He's available for weddings, birthdays, bar mitzvahs, and more. You can hit him up at 309-989-0232 for more information. Strictly Hip Hop is also brought to you in part by Peoria Gold Teeth and More. They specializes in custom grills with platinum, yellow, and rose gold up to $22K, along with custom chains and jewelry with VVS diamonds available. Their phone number is 309-989-0232 for more information. Strictly Hip Hop is also brought to you in part by Suiting Up Men's Apparel. They just don't sell suits, they build confidence. They are located at 4325 North Sheridan Road in Peoria, Illinois. Their phone number is 309-360-4476 for more information. Strictly Hip Hop is also brought to you in part by Groves Martial Arts and Self-Defense Academy, located at 1227 West Glen. Master Instructor Tanika Groves is a 6th-degree black belt, professionally teaching adults and children since 1992. Groves Martial Arts can be reached at 309-453-6599 or Groves Martial Arts 309 at gmail.com.
And also, big shout out to Marlon as well, too, man. We had that listening party. If y'all got an album that's dropping and you want to drop your listening party, definitely hit us up, strictlyhiphop@live.com, and we'll definitely make that happen for you. Man, look, lad, my computer ain't going to give it to me, man. My computer ain't going to give it to me, dog.
Well, the clock on the wall says it's time for us to ride. But we'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, doing the same thing.
My computer killed me.
Delivering the best in hip-hop and R&B. Shout out to Jern the Worm. And Miss Bradley. And Nico. We out.